So did everybody get to watch that video?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with that. So, somebody want to give me the rundown of what happened?
Pilot in command didn't listen to his co-pilot and didn't follow procedure.
Okay.
More than that, the pilot in command had a cocky, lackadaisical attitude. He just thought he could do whatever he wanted. He's above reproach.
Yeah, for sure.
Thing that killed me was the reverse thrust thing. I mean, I'm sure that's heated it up. It froze right away after that.
Yeah.
And then when they were taking off, you can tell when you're going fast enough. Like you could feel the airplane and its speed. So you should have aborted and just gone around, like taxi back around and asked for another go.
Okay.
Also leaving the anti-ice off.
Yeah. So this guy, they flew from Florida to Philadelphia, right? Was it Philly? I want to say it was Philly.
It was DC. They were in DC.
Oh, DC. That's right.
DC to Florida.
That's right. So weather conditions completely different than Florida, right? I mean, I can't remember what the temperature was in Florida when they left, but it was a nice sunny day down in Florida, and they get to DC and it's snowing, right? So they weren't very familiar because this airline is primarily based out of Florida, right? And goes to the Gulf and the Caribbean and places like that, but they get into this different weather system and they weren't really ready for it, were they?
Yeah, it did mention that both pilots, while they had a lot of overall experience, both had very, very little winter experience.
Yeah.
I think they had like
10 years on that type of plane.
Yeah, they had a lot of experience, very little winter type flying. And, like, I think it was Wes that said they didn't follow procedure. So they de-iced, right? Got de-iced, and then they're sitting in taxi, waiting to depart. Everything slowed down quite a bit. And they blew past their holdover time, right? You guys remember talking about holdover times on de-icing fluid? How I said each type of de-icer fluid has a certain amount of time that the aircraft can be on the ground before they have to be de-iced again, right?
Yep.
So they blow past their holdover time and they are like, oh, we'll be okay. They can see snow accumulating on the wings, correct? I believe they talked about that.
Yeah, the co-pilot did.
The co-pilot mentioned it like at least three times.
Yeah. And pilot in command is just like, we'll be okay. It's not, not a big deal. So they pulled up right next to, or right up behind the aircraft in front of them, trying to get the heat off of that aircraft to keep the snow off. and it would melt and roll down, turn to liquid on the back of the wing, and it was only really, that engine exhaust is really only hitting the front of the plane. It's not doing much that far back on them, right? So any snow that was accumulating, it would melt, and it would just kind of like drip down the back of the wing and freeze again. So it wasn't really doing any good at all, and that's not really a safe protocol. That goes against everything in the rule book. But this pilot thought he was a hot shot and felt like he was okay still. Completely disregarded his second in command. And like you said, he rolling down the runway. Co-pilot's like, I think we should not take off. Like, I think we should abort takeoff, and telling him, plane doesn't want to respond. Pilot's like, yeah, we got this still. Take off, and pretty much immediately they get off the ground and go right back down, and landed in the Potomac, right? So a lot of human factors went into that, led up to that accident where where it could have easily been avoided because of simple mistakes. Several people lost their lives. So when we go through flight training, or any part of aviation training, we go through a human factors portion, because human factors play a huge part in our decision making, and can lead to tragedy, just like that Hawaiian Flight 90. It's a bad deal, and it's sad because all that pilot had to do was listen to his second in command. That's why they're there. That's why we have redundancy, is because we don't see everything. We don't, it's impossible for us to be fully aware of absolutely everything that's going on and make the right decision 100% of the time. That's why we have backup. That's why these aircraft are flown with two people. So one thing that you guys will find out is dispatchers, we are considered crew. When we get up in the cockpit and sit in the jump seat, one of the things that the pilot will always say to you, the captain will always say to you, is if you see anything or hear anything, or something's out of the ordinary, please let us know. If you have questions about anything, please let us know. That's kind of required for them to do now because of this accident. The whole... What's up?
I was going to say that actually raised a few questions for me. Number one, I'm guessing because of the differences in technology and communications, the the role of dispatcher would have been a lot different at the time of the crash. But today, as dispatchers, if we see that a plane has been sitting in snowy conditions for an hour and a half or however long since it was last de-iced, what's our responsibility? Do we say you can't take off until you go back and get de-iced again? Or, I
No.
mean, what kind of role do we have nowadays?
I mean, even back then, it's kind of the same thing, right? If we see something out of the ordinary, or if we notice something, you know, talk to your crews. Communication is key in everything that we do. And you know, that being said, though, it's really hard for us to monitor all of the stuff that's going on like that. There's times where you will definitely catch it, and you know, I like to talk to my crews when I see that a crew's been taxiing for 60 minutes. You know, I like to talk to them and I'll crack a joke or two, or you know, just kind of communicate with them. But really, at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not the dispatcher said anything to the pilot, in that situation, even today, at the end of the day, the pilot is the one that's responsible for that operational aspect of it. If the pilot refuses to listen to us, or refuses to listen to you know, the FO, that's on him. And it's not, I mean, the dispatcher really would have had no role in this accident at all, regardless of, you know, today or 30 years ago. So because one of the big things is we don't know if they've been de-iced or not. We don't know if, you know, what type of fluid they used. If they got de-iced at the gate, or if they went out and to the pad and de-iced. You know, we can see some of that stuff, but that's not really our wheelhouse, if that makes sense. That's more operational than it is. Like, just to give you an example of something that I've personally seen, was one of the last flights that I was dispatching before I left. The pilot was going into a pretty nasty looking storm system, and I was getting pretty antsy. I was just like, this is not safe, you know. From everything that I'm seeing and everything that I'm reading on my weather charts and where his location and everything, I was just like, he's got to be getting thrown around like a rag doll and stuff, you know. And I was getting really nervous, and I was talking to the pilot, and I'm just like, you know, I told the pilot, I was like, I recommend you divert to your alternate. I said, things have gotten really bad at the airport, and I'm just not comfortable with the whole situation. And he responded back, he's like, we're going to go in and give it a look. And if we don't like it, we'll go. So I supplied him with all the information that I needed. I gave him all the current weather. I told him what was going on at the alternate, and I gave him, you know, the burn, how much fuel it would take to get there, and I supplied him with all the information I could. And at the end of the day, the pilot can see, and he knows a lot more of what's actually going on at any given point than we do. He can see what's going on outside the cockpit. And so, the pilot went in and he caught a very small window of perfect weather before the next cell hit, and got down on the ground. And it was kind of funny because, I saw this thunderstorm. I knew this thunderstorm was going to hit about the same time he got there, and the tops were reporting at like 65,000 feet. So super bad thunderstorm. He touched down and pulled off the runway, and then he sent me an ACARS and he said, we're going to have to hold on the tarmac because of thunderstorms. They don't want us hooking up to the gate. So they had to sit out on the taxiway until the thunderstorm passed. So, we got to allow our pilots to make decisions, and we got to trust that they're going to make good decisions. We are there to supply them with as much information as we can. But at the end of the day, they're the ones in the cockpit. They're the ones that can see what's actually going on and have an idea. And, they have the final say in everything. So, and with a pilot that arrogant, I mean, it's sad to say this, but 9 times out of 10, they're not going to listen to what the dispatcher has to say anyways. So he wouldn't even listen to his first officer. Especially back then, pilots and dispatchers had a pretty nasty relationship. A lot of pilots hated dispatchers, so it's getting better, that relationship, but there's still a lot of those older pilots have pretty extreme amount of arrogance. So but anyways, I'm really sorry to do this, but I need like 10 minutes to go to the bathroom. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. I'll be right back. All righty. Y'all ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that anybody wanted to say about that Hawaiian flight? Alrighty.
Sorry, I was connecting my mic. I personally thought it was fascinating. Like, it was sort of a perfect storm of a lot of different factors. That kind of goes into the accountability of everybody involved in the operation. I personally feel like obviously the pilot error and the reverse thrusters shooting slush potentially back into the engines, and the icing on the front of the engines that prevented the thrusters instruments from reading correctly. On top of, they talked about how the anti-ice didn't have the right balance and the valve had just been changed. And I don't know, I just felt like who knows what was the tipping point of all of those factors combined. But it did all come down to that one pilot deciding to just say, screw it, let's go. And I feel like in a lot of ways, especially in crew scheduling, and I don't know, in the operation, I feel like there's a lot of pressure to reach, certain goals, minimize delays, not cancel flights, different things like that. And I'm sure that pilot was dealing with a lot, and passengers were complaining. And in the documentary, it even talked about how the flight attendant was just so happy to finally be on the go, and it just feels like there's so much constant pressure of, within the operation, also passengers complaining, and especially now with social media, if something's delayed by 2 seconds, there's a Twitter storm of who knows what. And I think it's just important for everybody at every stage of the operation to understand that safety is first and foremost 100% of the goal. No matter how annoyed you are by a 2-3 hour, some of these weather delays are 7-8 hour delays, and no one should be feeling pressured to go into those things because they are inconvenienced by whatever delay they're taking. And I just feel like something like that obviously was just so preventable if everyone just took a step back and said, we're just gonna be safe and just go when all of this is cleared up. And I don't know, I just working in scheduling, I just had a lot of feelings about the entire operation and how so many factors played into that and what eventually led to so many deaths.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is a big part of every accident, right? Is just the loss of concern for safety a lot of times, whether it be the pilot or, there's almost always somebody's failure for safety, in a lot of our accidents. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, we shouldn't be pressuring the pilots to go, but there are certain times it's hard to find the balance. I know as a dispatcher personally, sometimes between pressuring a pilot to do something or laying off, there's a pretty fine balance. I know there are times where if I would have just given the pilot his wishes, then or said, yeah, everything looks great, or then there would have been several times where that would have been more of a failure on my part, just giving the pilot everything that he wants, because sometimes the pilots, their concern isn't for accomplishing any of the goals of the airlines, but more, I just want to go home now, um,
Yeah, and yeah, that's definitely a fine line. Like, we deal with that every single day with the legalities. Crews will be legal, and they'll just be like, "Nope, I'm not." Like, their flight duty extensions and everything like that, they are legal to go, but they'll try to fight us on it. And it is something that a lot of them are just gonna miss their commute home, and so they're just like, "I don't want to do this," and it is just an inconvenience for them. And
right.
Safety issues, I'm sure dispatching is going to be a lot different in terms of, is a flight legal to go, is just on, weather and everything like that, as opposed to legalities of their times. That's a different job. But
Right.
yeah, it's hard with pilots because you do want to, be safe, but yeah, a lot of them do have, their personal interests in mind, versus our job is to ensure that all the flights are run and run.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just what I'm trying to say. Is just finding that balance is really difficult, but part of our job. And yeah, legal to go as far as crew time comes, we pass that call along. But there's a lot of times where the pilots don't like the weather at the destination, or and we have to deal with it. And or pilots feel like they should keep the same plane all day, and shouldn't have to swap. aircraft and things like that we deal with as dispatchers that are extremely frustrating, and don't really accomplish the goal of the airline. So they're, just finding that balance is extremely hard to do. So I appreciate the comment. So let's talk a little bit about our dispatch resource management and our aeronautical decision making. So we're going to talk about human factors. We're going to do a little DRM training, talk about stress, the stress of the job and everything like that. How to make good judgment, how to make good decisions. And we're also going to learn about some of the hazardous attitudes that we tend to fall into as crew members, or as pilots do, and things like that. So how to identify them, and how to they call it like an antidote, the antidote for a bad decision. So how to overcome those bad decisions and different attitudes that we face. So human factors, multidisciplinary field devoted to optimizing human performance and reducing human error. It is a study of people working together in concert with machines, and also how we interact with our environment and how variables influence our performance. So some of the factors to understand human error and how performance is influenced by it: system design, physical and mental condition, communication, interaction, inadequate operator training. And we want to prevent it, and we want to operate safely and efficiently. So we'll go into each one of these. System design, physical and mental condition. We're going to talk about each one of these and how it plays into our decision making. Okay. So communication is key, right? I was in the military, and we got that hammered into our brains like you wouldn't believe. When there's a failure to communicate, there's a failure in the system, and it causes a collapse, a chain reaction throughout the entire system. So we need to learn how to communicate quickly, efficiently, and reliably. So communication includes team building, conflict resolution, situational awareness, information transfer, dissemination, problem solving, decision making, and dealing with automation. So the NTSB has done a lot of studies into this, and they found contributing factors to airline accidents. A lot of those go to, or can fall under the categories of inadequate operational control, inadequate collaborative decision making, and failure to adhere to our standard operating procedures. Okay, so operational control. What is operational control? How do we define that?
Operational control with respect to a flight is to exercise the authority of the authority over this. Oh my gosh!
You're close. Initiating,
conducting, and terminating a flight.
good. So it's the exercise of authority over initiating, conducting, and terminating a flight. Okay. So an adequate operational control would basically be like, you know, maybe we're timid to make a decision, a command decision on should we operate a flight or not? Is it safe? Sometimes we get captains that refuse to listen to their other crew members and will operate a flight regardless and abuse the operational control, right? Inadequate collaborative decision making. So not using our resources is a huge failure in the system. We have those resources to help us make decisions. We have in the OCC alone, I mean, Trevin can probably attest to this, and so can others, but we've got maintenance control. We've got crew support. We've got system controllers, our dispatch supervisor, dispatch floor, or the floor manager. We've got customer service representatives. I mean, we've got a whole lot of people working nonstop in the OCC, making decisions and helping one another, and it's all at our fingertips. We can literally, like, if we can't call them and get an answer, we've got instant messaging that we can use. We can also walk over to their desk. All these resources are literally at the tips of our fingers. So we need to be, when there's a big decision to be made, we need to be contacting these other areas because they're going to have a lot more experience handling one situation over another than we might. So we need to work as a team to make those decisions. And then failing to adhere to standard operating procedures, kind of a big deal as well, right? We have these standard operating procedures in place because of accidents, because of different, because of other incidents that have happened where there has been a failure, right? So we make these standard operating procedures to avoid making those same mistakes over and over and over again. So we need to follow our SOPs to a T in order to ensure the most safe and reliable outcome. Where we see a lot of problems with crews and dispatcher, between crews and dispatchers, is there's either a poor group decision, ineffective communication or inadequate leadership, or poor task or recourse management. Okay. We get some weird things out on the dispatch floor. Get pilots, one of my favorite calls that I get is a pilot calling me to tell me that I messed up on the dispatch release and should have listed an alternate. And I look at the TAF and it's like 10 and clear, it's just funny. Sometimes the pilot's attitude when you tell them, no, Captain, it's 10 and clear. Oh, I've been doing this for 25 years and I think I know when I need an alternate and when I don't. And it's like, well, what you think and what is actually legal are two different things, or the other way around. Why do I need an alternate? But some of the arrogance that you get from a pilot is almost comical at times.
So in that situation, would you put an alternate on there just because he wants one, or would you just say
No?
No.
It depends. So if it's 10 and clear and there's no reason to, I'd probably just educate him on just educate him on why he doesn't require an alternate, and see if that's effective. If he's still persistent, a lot of times, if it's like blatantly obvious he does not require an alternate, or he's asking for a crap ton of fuel and there's absolutely no reason to, a lot of times I just tell him, look, this is what I feel, and I don't agree with you at all. And, I'll try to push back, but if it's just not effective, then I'll just be like, okay, and just give them what they want. But at the same time, I try to educate them on why it's not necessary. So, a good example of that was I had a captain. He's pretty low in employee numbers, and he's kind of a jerk. But I had a flight going from Seattle to Boise, and the weather was perfect. And I planned the fuel to be 6,900 pounds. And I got an ACARS message about 20 minutes before the flight was supposed to leave. And it was from the captain, and the captain said the fuel will be 8,200 pounds. So he wanted 1,300 pounds on board extra. And I said, yes, sir. Not really justifiable. There isn't a cloud in the sky between you and Boise, but you're the captain. Kind of, he gave me that snobby attitude. And so he wrote back, that's right, Garrett, I am the captain, and it doesn't always have to do with the weather. And I wrote, Roger, Roger, I mean Jeff. And he said, I will make the final determination on fuel. And that was our correspondence. And I didn't mean to say his name. I was just reading it directly. But yeah, he was kind of I tend to respond with the same amount of like assholishness, I guess, if that was a word, as I get. And I mean, there was absolutely no reason for this guy to add an extra hour worth of fuel. Well, I guess it was 45 minutes about a fuel. But he felt like there was, and I tried to tell him that, look, there's not any reason for this. And, because of his arrogance, regardless, I'm going to do it anyways because I'm the captain. So it's like, what do you do at that point? You really can't do anything. So I don't know. I probably could have handled that situation better, but it was like my last week and I was kind of tired of captains like him.
That just happened at the end?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sometimes taking the low road can be kind of fun.
Yeah. That last week, my ACARS messages weren't the most professional. I was cracking a lot of jokes to pilots and having a little bit of fun. And I mean, I was trying to be a dick, but at the same time, on that one, I don't know. That situation was just messy.
I have to kind of interrupt here. There was a very famous thing, Kern County Sheriff, Bakersfield, Central California.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who basically prepped all the sheriff's cars was retiring. And so the very last car he did on the passenger side, which isn't seen as often, instead of putting Kern County Sheriff, to serve and protect or whatever it is, he put kicking your ass and taking your donuts. And that car drove around for about 2 weeks before anybody noticed it or said anything about it.
Well, hey, Garrett, in that situation, do you have to change the dispatch release so that it updates how many gallons are on there?
It's not required. With fuel, it's not really required. I just notated the system. I didn't even send a release or anything like that. I just notated it in the system.
In fact, sometimes the pilots will ask the fueler to put a little bit extra on, and like nothing's really happened when I do it. So
yeah, so pilots up to 500 pounds, they don't have to ask the dispatcher. Anything more than that, they should ask the dispatcher. It's in their SOPs, at least with SkyWest. And but anyways, a lot of captains will just make that decision without involving the dispatcher. And that's another reason why I kind of responded the way I did, was because the captain was going to do it either way, regardless of whether or not I had anything to say back. And I had been doing it long enough that I could tell kind of what was going on. And that's that captain in particular. He does it more just to be a dick to the dispatchers. Excuse the language. He's pretty notorious around the office with dispatchers. And so when I saw that I had him, and then I saw that ACARS message, I kind of let him have it a little bit.
Sounds like a nice guy.
Yeah, he's probably a great guy when he's not in a cockpit.
I doubt it.
I don't know. It's hard to tell. Yeah, I mean that captain, like I said, you'll probably run into him if you work for SkyWest. Nobody likes him. And that's another thing, is you get a dispatchers talk with each other a lot. And I mean, you don't really want to fall into the trap of prejudgment on everybody. But at the same time, like, when there's a riff, everybody hears about it. It's like, if you're LDS, it's like Relief Society, is what I would compare it to, where it's like a bunch of old biddies talking to each other, all the gossip in the world. That's pretty much the dispatch floor. We know which captains are the way they are. We know which crews, I had heard about this guy long before, and yeah, there's a couple other captains that have a pretty poor reputation around the office. There's also some captains that are like, dude, that guy's a cowboy, that guy's awesome, So, and then you hear the same about dispatchers or maintenance controllers, or you'll meet the Raven. This guy like walks around the office and sounds like a freaking raven, drives everybody nuts. But you'll meet him. You'll know exactly what I'm
Wait,
talking
he
about.
caused like a raven?
Yeah,
What?
yeah. I mean,
That
there's
seems really irritating.
there's like a lot of things that you just kind of get. Everybody in the office talks with each other, and everybody has their opinions. I don't know. It's kind of funny. Um, yeah, kind of fun. DRM. Okay,
Okay, what does DRM stand for?
dispatch resource management.
Ah, okay.
So this is us. When you hear DRM, once you get hired, that usually means that you get to talk to your other dispatchers to get answers for your tests. So it's a good thing. Everybody works together to complete a test.
That's cool. How many tests are there?
I don't know. We do recurrent every year. When you guys go through your initial training, but yeah, when you go through your initial training, you'll have multiple tests, and you won't get to use DRM on those ones except for like the last one. But the tests are kind of hard. You go through a lot of very in-depth training the first 3 weeks that you're with the airline, and it's like everything you learn in this class but condensed to 3 weeks. So, and much more specific. Not trying to scare anybody, but it's a lot. So, but they've had hundreds of dispatchers go in through the training before you, so it's nothing new to them, and they know how to help you out, so don't let it scare you. So benefits of DRM. PIC and dispatcher have joint operational control. The dispatcher duties include communication and coordination with many people. The two distinct benefits are we have better management of information and recourses for safe flight operations. And then we're better at doing our jobs, right? So it just improves our safety. So here's our DRM concepts. The most importance of DRM training is understanding internal and external influences. So importance of good communication. We've got to communicate effectively, like I was talking about earlier. Let's see. So one thing that I've been wanting to bring up with communication is the phonetic alphabet. Who knows the phonetic alphabet? Is there anybody, I guess I should say, is there anybody that has no clue what I mean by the phonetic alphabet? Don't be embarrassed.
I know some of it, but probably not all of it.
All right.
I downloaded it off of images and I've been working on it.
Yeah, so that is something. Yeah, so let me pull this up. This is something that you guys have to have memorized because it is super, super important. Crap. It's part of that clear, concise communication. So we don't say things like D for dog. We don't say B for Bob or things like that. We need to use the phonetic alphabet when communicating with air traffic control, with pilots, pretty much with anybody when we in concern of the flight, So let me see if I can find it. It's probably faster just to type it in.
It probably is.
Okay, so anyways, this is what I'm talking about. And I believe this is also on the final. We ask you some of the letters. What is the phonetic alphabet for G and Q and stuff like that. So um, let's see. I'm going to save it. I'll throw it on the Google Drive for you guys. But anyways, yeah, memorize this. Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot Golf Hotel India Juliet Kilo Lima Mike November Oscar Papa Quebec Romeo Sierra Tango Uniform Victor Whiskey X-Ray Yankee Zulu. It's easy. Got to use it. Especially when you're talking to air traffic control. If you don't use that and you're trying to communicate with them, it's going to piss them off first and foremost. But it's just going to, everything is going to um, yeah, but they're going to be confused as to what information you're trying to relay to them. So, like when we're relaying flight numbers, we say Sierra Kilo Whiskey if you work for SkyWest, Delta Lima if you're Delta, you know, Sierra Whiskey Alpha if you're Southwest Airlines. You need to use that termination. Ugh, not termination. You need to use that verbiage because it is that effective communication. It's what's been set up and is used throughout the aviation industry.
I think you were looking for terminology.
Terminology. There we go. It's, you know, something else that's kind of interesting is part of the effective communication is, you know, everything in aviation, you have to be able to read, write, and speak English fluently in order to do it. Hold on, sorry. All right, but yeah, communication is key. I think I've beat that dead horse enough. So some of the aspects of good communication, briefings, it's assertiveness, inquiry, conflict resolution, listening, interdepartmental coordination, and interpersonal relationships. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of these. Assertiveness. So, assertiveness. There is passive, there's being assertive, and then there's being overbearing, right? So, this goes back to what we were talking about with that captain, right? And like, are we pushovers and just give the captains everything they want? Or do we, be assertive and say, you know what, that's not really something that I agree with? We need to be assertive. I was overbearing with that captain, I'll admit it. But at the same time, there are other conflicts that I've encountered on the dispatch floor. Um, you know, one example would be I was working the mountain desk and I had a flight going into Aspen, and there was a fire. Um, there's a temporary flight restriction that interfered with Aspen's approach. So when the TFR was active, um, basically our aircraft weren't able to land in Aspen. And I loaded this captain up with a lot of fuel. And I don't know if I've already told this story to you guys or not, but loaded this captain up with a ton of fuel. And he had an alternate, a good alternate. The weather was good. The only question was, is the TFR going to go active while he's en route or not? So he launched, and he was almost on initial approach into Aspen, and the TFR went hot, so went active. So that there was, firefighting aircraft that were dropping retardant on the fire. And so he wasn't able to land in Aspen. But because I had given him like 45 minutes of hold fuel, he had like an additional 20 or 30 minutes of contingency fuel and a good alternate. He was able to hang out for a little bit. So he, I had briefed him on the game plan if the TFR went active before he even left. So followed through with the briefing part here, right? Said, Captain, if the TFR goes active, I want you to hold as long as you can, because the TFR, as soon as they get done dropping the retardant, the TFR will go cold or inactive, and you'll be able to get in. There will be a window of opportunity, and you'll be able to get in. So the captain was hanging out. He had done 3 turns holding, and he sent me an ACARS message and said, how much longer do you want me to hold? And I said, well, you've still got 7,000 pounds of fuel on board. Keep holding. And he said, well, if I divert to my alternate, can I just go back to Salt Lake? Once I divert, once we offload the passengers that are trying to get to Aspen. So kind of the plan of action is when we divert from Aspen, we'd go to Grand Junction and they would load them up on buses and take them to drive them to Aspen, right? Thing with Aspen is you've got a lot of like very wealthy people that live in Aspen that don't like that so much. That hour and a half bus ride into Aspen kind of pisses off a lot of people. So I'm like, well, that's not really in my head. I'm like, that's not really an option I want to entertain. It's there if I need it, but it's not something that I want this pilot to just be like, oh yeah, you just, drop them off in Grand Junction and go home. Because then I know exactly what's going to happen, right? The pilot, the second I say, yeah, you'd probably go right back to Salt Lake rather than try to go back to Aspen. I knew if I sent that over ACARS, the pilot would immediately divert because pilots don't like holding very much. And so what I said to him, even though he was probably going to go back to Salt Lake, was nope, we'd just hang out until the TFR's cold again, and then I'd send you right back to Aspen. I said that to him, and he said, okay, we'll continue to hold. So being assertive in that situation got him to hold a little bit longer, and about 10 minutes after I sent that ACARS message, he was able to land in Aspen, right? Less time than him diverting to Grand Junction. Grand Junction's about a 15 to 17 minute diversion. But since I was able to get him to hold, he held for 10 more minutes and then got all of his passengers where they wanted to go. Right? Super awesome. So sometimes we have to anyways, I was assertive and it was a good thing for that situation. If I would have been passive, I would have had a diversion, bunch of pissed off customers, and it could do damage to the airline. Really, at the end of the day, a lot of airlines live and die off of reviews, customer reviews. Why do you think United Airlines paid Dr. Dow $1 million to basically sweep his entire situation under the rug? Even though they were completely in the right, I'll have you, they still did it to save face, right? Reputations are huge in the airlines. So we need to be assertive, but overbearing is kind of not an option as well. going back to my conversation with that captain, it didn't do anything for me. It probably just hurt the relationship between that captain and future dispatchers, really, at the end of the day. And, you know, looking back on it, you go, I probably shouldn't have been such a jerk. But, yeah, I mean, it can complicate future situations, for sure. You know. By the way, that pilot landed with more than 1,300 pounds on board, too. 1,300 extra pounds, I should say. The pilot landed with like 4,500 pounds of fuel, which is a lot. So, but yeah, inquiry. It's okay to ask questions. I ask questions to my dispatch supervisor all the time. The only wrong question as a dispatcher is the question that you don't ask, right? You have to ask questions. Sometimes things get really, really like muddy, like you don't understand a certain NOTAM. You don't understand if this is something that requires something else. It's okay to ask questions. I wouldn't always go to my, supervisor. Sometimes sometimes I would just turn around and ask the dispatcher behind me, but you have to ask questions. You're not going to know everything, and if you do, you probably have spent a little too much time in the back cave. A lot of these things take years and years of experience, and there are even times I'd go to my dispatch supervisor or dispatch manager and they'd be like, I have no idea. I need to go and ask somebody. So ask questions, ask a lot of questions, because it's only going to make you a better dispatcher. Let's see. Actively listening. That's something I suck at as a dad. There's plenty of times where my wife has to slap me across the head and tell me to pull my head out of my ass and listen to what's going on with my daughters and what's going on with the family. So that's something I constantly am working on. But huge important key in good communication. Interdepartmental coordination, I mean, we've talked about that one plenty, and relationships, right? So another huge part of dispatching, workload management. This will make and break dispatchers 100% of the time. Dispatchers that don't work ahead and fall behind lose their mind the second something doesn't go as planned. We have to be super reactive and super adaptive to situations that don't go as planned, right? We need to be super proactive, and we need to plan ahead as much as we possibly can. But when we get a call from a captain to redo a dispatch release or something like that, if we haven't been proactive, it can really destroy the rest of the day. So we need to be super proactive, but also at the same time, when a situation arises, we need to be very reactive and be able to handle the situation quickly and efficiently. That includes calling up your supervisor and saying, can you take flights off my desk because I've just got too much going on. I had a student that was hired and had an issue with workload management, and it really hurt them bad. It's okay to ask for help. What's not okay is when it's an everyday thing and you're just not proactive at all. But if we're proactive and plan ahead, then it makes our lives so much easier to handle situations in addition to everything else that's going on. Incredibly reduces our stress load. I know that there were days where I would work like an hour ahead. I'd have, we're supposed to release dispatches, releases 90 minutes before, 90 to 60 minutes before the flight. As early as 90 minutes before the flight, as late as 60 minutes. They don't want them any later than 60 minutes. So I would be like technically 2.5 hours ahead because I would work an hour ahead of when my flight was what we call going yellow. And I would get a call, and had I not worked that extra hour ahead at that time, like I would have been behind on every single one of my releases. And there were times where I couldn't help it. I'd have 2 or 3 things pop up and I would get behind on my releases. And you just have to be able to manage that, ask for help, and yeah. But also, one of the other big things is maintain that good situational awareness, because even though you're handling certain situations, you got to remember that there are other flights that are in the air that you need to be watching as well. The last thing you need is to have a whole bunch of crap going on and then all of a sudden a flight pops up that you haven't been paying attention to. Flight pops up as a diversion. Talk about throwing a huge amount of stress on yourself. That'll do it. That'll put you over the edge. So this is a huge part of dispatching, is workload management, which leads to stress. Stress kind of encompasses a lot of things, right? So the definition is the body's response to demands placed on it. So we need to know what happens when we have a lot of stress, right? And we need to know how to counter it. One of the biggest things, and I'm really working on this because my life is extremely stressful and I am constantly under huge amounts of stress, but something that has not helped me through any of it is my physical condition. This is something that is very key. If you're not getting enough sleep at night, if you're not exercising and staying healthy, when we get into stressful situations, it just increases our body's response to it. So I know there were times where, like, my response to the stressful situation was I just wanted to go to sleep, right? And it was really hard for me to stay awake and active at my desk. At any job that I've been in, not dispatch per se, but you've got to keep yourself in good physical condition. Eat a healthy breakfast, things like that. Those simple things pay dividends when you're put into these stressful situations. Psychological as well. I mean, the physical trickles into our psychological. If we're not getting enough sleep and we go into not psychological, but physiological, right? I think it should be psychological. I don't know. But we get into a situation, our reactions are slowed. I've heard somebody say that I can't remember the exact amount of sleep, like somebody that's had 4 hours of sleep the night before is like has the equivalent response as somebody that's drunk. I can't remember the exact saying, but it plays a huge part. They kind of go hand in hand. Staying healthy in mind and body, right? And then emotional, like sometimes getting into stressful situations, people lock up, and it's an emotional response, right? So preventing that by doing certain problem solving, thinking through situations, and we'll talk about some ways to help overcome those emotional or psychological or physical problems. But here are a couple causes of stress: life events, workload, people and stress, right? That stress can be contagious. I've seen, one person having a bad day trickle into several people all of a sudden having a bad day. How we respond to other people when we're in a stressful situation can trickle into how they respond back or at the same time. It's like a disease in the office. One person's having a really bad day. Typically, people directly, like next to them in their immediate proximity, tend to have difficult or bad days as well. So, this is all part of that DRM is helping one another out. So. So we'll kind of talk about that here, but okay. So here, so this graphic kind of depicts for pilots where the stress and the, call it the margin of safety, is. So this red line here on this graph represents the pilot's capabilities, right? Where are they, not necessarily where are they most capable at, but what requires the most pilot input and decision making, right? So during our pre-flight and taxi and takeoff and cruise, you can see that the pilot's kind of at a peak, right? They may be a very capable pilot, but this green line represents, I'm sorry, I kind of got that confused, but pilot capabilities, this red line. So, you know, where's the pilot the most aware and most like on top of his game? So he may be very, very highly capable, but the task requirements you can see really come to play in approach and landing, right? But you can also see at the same time, that's when pilots are starting to drop off from stress or exhaustion and things like that. So, you know, we need to keep this in balance and in check. We need to help. It's very much so the same with dispatchers is during the morning, it seems like that's when we're really on our game. Our first, we call them banks, hour banks. So each hour of our day has a certain number of flights in it. And the last like 2 or 3 hours of the day, there's no more flights that we have to put dispatch releases out for. But you can see the same curve happen. We are on top of our game. We're freaking, you know, dispatch gods in the morning. But as we go throughout the day and our workload gets lighter, you can see this huge curve with dispatchers. But remember what I said the other day with the interview, where is our priority? Aircraft in the sky, right?
In the sky.
Yeah. So at the end of our day, that's typically when we have the most airplanes in the sky, you know, up to 20 at a time. And we're supposed to be monitoring these flights and stuff like that, but it's kind of interesting to see. You see a lot of dispatchers standing up, walking around and talking starting at about 10 o'clock. And it kind of carries on like that. For the next couple hours, right? Because you got the dispatchers that come in at 2 and then at 3 and then at 4. But dispatchers, we kind of like get a little lazy. It's like, oh, we don't have any more dispatch releases. Our job's done. But no, that's really the time that we need to be the most observant of what's going on with our flights.
Okay, so I've got a question.
Uh-huh.
So I went with Aubrey and I was checking it out one day. On each Fusion or whatever, I think it's called, when you see the planes, does each dispatcher have only their flights on there, or are they watching all of them? How does that work exactly?
So we can customize it per, you know, dispatchers. Some dispatchers like having multiple desks or like to see, you know, like all of SkyWest's aircraft and stuff like that. Me personally, I would only have my flights, my desk flights up, because that's all I wanted to. That was my primary concern, right? If let's say my flight was coming up on a thunderstorm, a line of thunderstorms, I would turn on other flights to see what they're doing and if they're getting through a particular area. But yeah, it depends on the dispatcher. We can customize it to what we want to see, really. That Fusion software is extremely powerful, and super awesome.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, literally with the click of a button, I could make it. Let's see. You can kind of do the same thing with FlightAware. Let's see here. So that was weird. Let's just see here. So, we could make our fusion look like this if we wanted to, where it's just a massive glob of airplane.
No.
Or
Not
we're
efficient.
or we can. Narrow it down to our particular airline, like this. This is Southwest Airlines. Actually, let's go back here. Let's see here. Look at that. So this is all the SkyWest flights in the air right now. And we could narrow it down to our particular desk, so it would really declutter what was going on. But yeah, we were capable of doing this and much more. You could narrow it down to just CRJ 200s. So it was really cool software. What the world? There you go.
Well, who knew? Huh.
That's super weird. I didn't even know. Didn't even know we had CRJ. Well, not us, but
Somebody does.
somebody's got CRJs out in Russia.
Well, they've got one.
Yeah. But anyways, just interesting of note, you guys noticed that we were like SkyWest Airlines had like the 5th most amount of airplanes in the sky at that moment. We operate
It's hard to
a
tell.
lot. Let's see. I'll show you guys really quick. Show you what I was looking at here. All right, so this is the number of flights currently in the air. Right now, SkyWest has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're number 8 with the most amount of flights in the air. Number 8. And that's behind only majors, right? And we even have more flights than majors have. The next regional on the list, let's see. would be WestJet, and we had 100 more flights in the air than they did. Oh, hold on, Republic has 67. That shows you how many flights SkyWest operates. Like,
I would have thought ExpressJet would have been second.
no. ExpressJet's actually getting less and less.
Yeah, I know. My wife has to deal with all their planes coming over.
Yeah, ExpressJet is actually a sister company to SkyWest Airlines. Let's see if I can find ExpressJet on here.
They had 46 flights.
Oh, they had 46? Okay. There you go. Mesa ExpressJet. Yeah. Let's see, Compass. Let's see where Compass is. I know Compass does a lot of like Delta flights. Anyways, it's kind of crazy. SkyWest is no like small airlines, that's for sure.
Compass was at like 22 or 23.
Oh, you saw them? There you go. Yeah. That's kind of mind-boggling to me. More flights in the air than Air Canada even. Or Air France. Or British Airways. Or Lufthansa. Schmokes.
I saw an investment thing a little while ago, not very long ago, but it was actually comparing SkyWest to Air France, which I thought was kind of a weird comparison. But they're, I guess, fairly similar in terms of total stock market value. But SkyWest has more planes, has better outlook. So, basically, if you're buying stock in an airline between either Air France or SkyWest, buy SkyWest.
Yeah, SkyWest, when Adam started with SkyWest like 7 or 8 years ago now, I want to say it was like 8 years ago. I think he said that stocks were at like $3 a share for SkyWest. Today, the market closed at $60.95. That's pretty insane growth in that short of time. But that being said, I worked for L3, and when, like, percentage-wise, SkyWest has a lot more growth, but when I started with L3, our stocks, I think, were at like $27 a share. And when I sold a bunch of stocks just not long ago, we were at $215 a share. So I was a happy daddy. But anyways, stock markets. I wish I was smart and could, invest. So this is a stress pyramid. Shows us, positive stress and negative stress, the demands that it places on us. It's kind of interesting. Stress can lead to poor health, illness, errors. One of the number one killer, well, the number one killer of firefighters is heart disease, heart attacks, and stuff like that. Talk about a stressful job. So, just kind of goes to prove that stress is a pretty big deal and can kill you. Chronic overload of stress is pretty conducive to a poor chain of decision making. So,
About stress, I just left a good, really good paying job. It was so stressful that I was seriously starting to have like really physical conditions that I couldn't do it anymore.
yeah. I've been there. I've done that. It takes a toll on you. In fact, I left L3, took a huge pay cut, and then when I left SkyWest, I took a big pay cut to mow lawns right now. But my overall health condition has actually improved quite a bit because I get off my ass now. This job's been good for me. It's not as stressful. You don't have to think about things too much. Just got to get straight lines on your cuts, right? It's a lot less stressful than thousands of people's lives every day. So, acute or short-term stress, the way we deal with it, goose fraba, right? If you guys have seen the movie Anger Management, rub your earlobes and just say goose fraba. Relax, stay calm, count backwards from 10, close your eyes and do some deep breathing. For long-term stress, nutrition, talked about like lifestyle actions already, going to the gym, go running, that stuff really helps a lot. Staying physically in shape will play a big part into dealing with stress. Take care of your spirit too, you know. So situational awareness, the definition from NASA is the awareness of acknowledging and assessing, and is the basis for choosing course of action in a situation both now and in the future. So here's the components of situational awareness. So some ways to identify you've lost your situational awareness. Failure to stay ahead, right? Talked about being proactive. If you can't stay ahead, you've lost your situational awareness. There's no way that if you are behind that you can watch everything that's going on. Right? You'll have planes taking off and landing and you won't even know that they even taxied, you know. If you have to repeat yourself, or whether that be verbally or with different tasks, if you have to go back and redo your work, that's a loss of situational awareness as well. Channelized or fixation on something can confusion or uncertainty of the air traffic control system, shortcuts from SOPs, unsure of weather conditions, and conditions of the aircraft. Right? So how do we prevent it? We think ahead, be proactive, right? Manage our time, manage our stress, be vigilant, prioritize, use good communication, and yeah. So some of the components, let's take a break. I'm done talking right now.
You have another class starting up like 2 weeks after ours ends, man. You're not going to have dinner very long.
I know, it's a never-ending story. Worth it, though. I enjoy doing this. All right. So let's talk about some dispatch training. Got your initial training, then you got recurrent every single year. These exercises are really, I think we spent maybe 30 seconds on it. But anyways, we do like a classroom lecture, and then a lot of times, at least at SkyWest, they make it pretty fun doing the recurrent training. This last one they did deal or no deal, and like the class, the group that got the $1 million, $1 million suitcase got like a pizza party or something like that. You know, just something fun and stupid to pass time. That's one thing you guys will appreciate about dispatching is we like to eat. So, you know, they bring in food a lot for us, especially if we're having a bad day. Trevin's probably experienced this. It's like a what do we even call them? Irregular operations day, and they'll like bring in pizza and say thanks for everybody coming in and working hard, and sorry it's a shitty day. Here's some food. I don't know. Have you been in on that, Trevin? I don't know if crew support gets the same treatment, but I think they do. I remember one weekend they were like, we had 3 back-to-back IROP days, and they brought us like lots of pizza and cake and ice cream and drinks, and the director came in and was like, sorry it's been crappy. Hope this helps. Seems like most of the days that I wasn't working is when they got the special treatment, though. But we used to, just between us dispatchers, we'd always have somebody going on a donut run or a burrito run or something. So, kind of fun. I don't know what that has to do with training, but cool. So, continuing reinforcement, that's something that we do every single day. We ask questions, help each other, stuff like that. So this is ADM, aeronautical decision making. Okay, I think it says it on this first slide here. Yeah, there you go. So ADM is a systematic approach to mental process used by aircraft pilot and or dispatchers to consistently determine the best course of action in response to a given set of circumstances. So this is kind of a flow chart of our decision-making process. Never ever used this when I was dispatching, but just kind of gives you a fun little breakdown. So our decision making, our dispatch responsibility, we need to be familiar with our aircraft, right? We need to know, and a big part of your initial training when you do go to an airline is going to be aircraft systems, okay? We need to know our aircraft, no doubt about it. If we don't, then we're just asking for stressful situations, because we get a lot of questions about, different things that are going on with our aircraft. Maintenance control, there's certain things where they have to call us and get approval to defer something. And if we don't know what it is, or we don't know how to figure out what's going on with the airplane, how it affects us, we can really screw ourselves, If we accept an aircraft that, hey, we're going to defer the anti-ice system, and it's like Dallas Fort Worth in a stormy day, we may have just shot ourselves in the foot if we accept the aircraft and accept the deferral. So we need to be cognizant of, what different things do to our aircraft, how our aircraft works and performs. We need to know how to do our routes. This is a big one too. When we have to do our route building at work, some people lose their minds. It's like if they have an FMS deferral, they just like collapse. They don't know how to deal with it. We're going to learn how to do that, and I'll tell you guys right now, a lot of the students that have come through this program, we kind of have like races in training and out on the floor between dispatchers from different schools, because you're probably going to be working with dispatchers from other schools. This school, when it comes to route building, I would put students from this school up against any other dispatch course in the country, because my students, Adam's students, we tend to be really good at route building because we get a lot of practice doing it in our flight planning section. So it's fun though. Weather conditions, right? We need to know how to read our weather and NOTAMs and PIREPs and all those fun things. Need to stay in good physical condition. And we need to know the different procedures of air traffic control. So we're making a go, no go decision. We need to kind of take all the information and make a good decision there. That's all that slide was. It's kind of a dumb slide, but good judgment involves gathering all the information, processing the information, and performance. Follow through, right? Making good decisions, being vigilant, and being able to find problems and fix problems is is really going to help us out too when we're talking about good judgment. Okay, alternatives, background problems, decision, action. Cool. Learning judgment. We're always, always, always learning, right? Never get complacent when you become a dispatcher. Okay. This school, you may learn a lot, but there is so much more to learn, and I promise you that. The second you just get complacent in your training, you're going to run into a lot of problems out on the floor. So, do research online. Look at new techniques and different technology that's being introduced to aviation. Stay ahead of the curve, right? So improving our judgments, head work, right? We need to detect, recognize, and diagnose problems quickly. We need to determine alternate courses of action and assess the risks involved. Okay, that's our head work. Our attitude is our motivation, choose and execute suitable course of action, and then do we act or don't we act on the issues that we're presented with. Here's our DECIDE model. DECIDE is detect, estimate, choose, identify, do, then evaluate. Okay, so detect the fact that change has occurred, estimate the need to counter or react to the change, choose a desirable outcome for the success of the flight, identify actions to successfully control the change, sorry, I got disconnected there. Do the necessary action to adapt to the change, then evaluate and affect the effect of the action. We need to do this consistently, like constantly throughout the day. Keep running this DECIDE model through our heads, evaluating all of our decisions, right? Pretty important. So let's talk about hazardous attitudes. This is a big part of our human factors. And this is, we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of throw this in and help you guys recognize the issues that Air Florida Flight 90 had. Kind of apply them to the pilot's decision making, right? So anti-authority, you think he had a little bit of that anti-authority, don't tell me what to do, I'm the pilot in command, is that something you guys could see in that pilot?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, right? So when we are faced with that, the way we counter it, what we call the antidote, is follow the rules, right? Listen to what other people have to say. Things like that are really going to help us make the right decision. Another hazardous attitude is invulnerability. So it could never happen to me, right? I know I get this way sometimes where it's like, oh, I won't fall asleep on the road. It would never happen to me. And then I catch myself like getting drowsy on a road, right? So the way we counter that is just always know that we aren't unique. Like anything and everything can happen to us just as much so as it happened to the other guy. So Macho, this is another one I picked up on with that captain. I'll show you I can do it, you know. Even as they were like taking off, he was still displaying this attitude of macho, right? It's like, oh, we'll be okay. Next thing you know, they're in the Potomac. Okay. Pretty dangerous. So taking chances is foolish is the way we counter that macho attitude. Resignation. This one's super, super dangerous.
That was the other pilot, though.
What was that?
That was the other pilot. He had kind of resigned. I can't say the word. He had kind of had that resignation attitude. He was like, he would question, but then he didn't really fight for it.
Right.
And maybe if he did, he'd be alive today.
Yeah, he was super passive, wasn't he? Just kind of like, well, I guess, you know, the captain knows what he's doing.
Well, and even though he knew in his own way, he knew, and he still didn't do it. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, you know, we had kind of a, like Trevin said, a perfect storm of decision making that happened there. You know, we had one guy that was macho and one guy that just kind of let it happen. Like, well, I guess this is it, you know. And these attitudes don't complement one another. They just compile the, you know, compound the issues. Just make everything worse, right?
It does, yeah.
Impulsivity, just do it, right? Think of Colin Kaepernick. Just do it. Even if something you believe in makes you sacrifice everything. Sorry, little pop culture in with it. There you go. So, not so fast. Think first, buddy. Don't be impulsive. So, being effective, it's going to change our attitude. Realizing that you can't change people's personalities, but you can change your attitude and how you react to them. It's kind of important, right? You're always going to have that ornery old guy that, and I was an ornery old guy. I still kind of am, but can't change the personality, but you can definitely control how you react to people, and not allow it to affect you. Be assertive as dispatchers. It's very important, right? Like I said before, we as dispatchers can see a whole heck of a lot that's going on, right? We're not limited so much when we're looking at forecasts and stuff like that. As we're not as limited as the pilots are in that sense. So sometimes when a pilot calls and has a question or thinks he has an answer, right? We need to be assertive and we need to make a decision and stick to it. And I mean, we want to listen, but at the same time, when it comes to the decision at the end, we need to be assertive of our position and not just roll over and take it, right? And then most importantly, we need to work together. Delegation, kind of important, and we need to be able to ask for help. So, anyways, there's that awesome human factors PowerPoint. So this advisory circular is just here for you guys. It talks about human factors. It talks about different talks about human factors, stuff like that. Let's see. Just kind of goes through our responsibilities as dispatchers, things like that. So, yeah. It's there for you guys to read. The highlighted portions we've gone through and taken the necessary information. So if you guys even want to just briefly read over the highlighted portions, get some information on that, I highly recommend it. These advisory circulars are very important and will only make you a better dispatcher. Sometimes they're a little dry, I'll admit that, but yeah. So we're going to talk about this crash here, Alaska Flight 261. I'm not going to go through this PowerPoint because the format of it got severely ruined. I don't know what the crap happened to it.
So is this a SkyWest flight?
SkyWest?
Yeah.
No. SkyWest did have a part in this Alaska Flight 261, but it's not a SkyWest flight. This is actually an MD-80.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You can see that when it gets big, but
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean the CRJ and the MD-80s look a lot alike, so kind of looks like a CRJ 700. But we're just going to kind of talk about this. Let's see if I can pull something up. Maybe even pull up the Wikipedia of it. So, let's see. I'm going to pull some of this up to kind of help explain the story of what happened and kind of the lessons learned from this accident. So, Alaska Flight 261 was going from somewhere in Mexico. I can't remember what the route of flight exactly was. So we'll pull up the Wikipedia to kind of help us with some of this technical stuff. From Jalisco, Mexico to Seattle. From Puerto Vallarta to Seattle Tacoma Airport. Okay. What happened was while they were en route, so this is I can't remember what the name of this island is. Anyways, while they were en route, they started experiencing, they felt a heavy vibration in the yoke. And they contacted the dispatcher. The dispatcher got maintenance control on the line as well. And basically, they started troubleshooting the aircraft. They have what's called the pickle switch, which I can't remember exactly what it does, but anyways, maintenance control told them to hit this pickle switch, and it would somehow help them. So they hit the switch, and they immediately went into a dive. Lost all vertical control of the aircraft. They contacted aircraft traffic control and said, we've lost the vertical control of our airplane. And then a couple seconds later, about 30 seconds later, they said, we got it back under control, but they were fighting it. And I believe it said something like 130 pounds of pressure, basically, is what they equated it to on the yoke. So, I mean, the pilot was all but standing on the dash, pulling back on this, on his yoke, trying to keep that vertical control of the aircraft. So, the captain called to ATC, said it really wants to pitch down. He's talking to the maintenance control. They kept trying to troubleshoot it. When they initially, their first initial descent, let's see, it says the plane dropped from 31,000 feet to between 23 and 24,000 feet in about 80 seconds. So that's like an extreme nose down dive, right? They requested that ATC blocked out a portion, an altitude, so that they could try to continue troubleshooting the problem. They were going to divert to LAX, but they wanted a little bit of time to try to figure out what was going on with the airplane. They said over the radio, if it's controllable, we ought to try to land. They deployed the flaps and slats, and that helped. But then, as soon as the pilot's like, okay, the flaps and slats helped maintain control, he said, let's bring them back up to see if, what happens. They heard a loud bang over the radio and basically went into a vertical dive, straight vertical dive, and crashed just off of, what's the name of this island? Anacapa Island. So we're going to listen to the audio recording between Alaska Flight 261 and air traffic control. So
Alaska 261, we are
can everybody hear it?
Dive here. Alaska 261, say again. Triple pitch. Alaska 261, say again, sir. Yeah, we're at 26,000 feet. We are in a vertical dive. Not a dive yet, but we've lost vertical control of our airplane. Alaska 261, Roger. We're at 23.7, request. Yeah, we got it back under control there. No, we don't. Okay. Alaska 261, say the altitude you'd like to remain at. 10 Foxtrot, clear direct Oceanside.
Direct Oceanside, 10 Fox.
Alaska 552, descend and maintain flight level 240.
Descend and maintain flight level 240, Alaska 552.
Alaska 261, clear condition.
261, we're at 24,000 feet, kind of stabilized. We're flowing here, and we're going to do a little troubleshooting. Can you give me a block between 20 and 25?
Alaska 261, maintain block altitude by level 200 through by level 250.
Alaska 261, we'll take that block. We'll be monitoring for you.
Alaska 261, you over here with me yet, sir?
CLA Delta X-ray, we do have that airplane quite high and up at 1 o'clock.
0 Delta X-ray, right? Just kind of keep your eye on him. He's having some pretty bad problems up there right now. As far as we know right now, he doesn't have any intent to go below 17,000, but keep your eye on him, okay?
Will do, Delta X-ray.
Thanks.
Hi, 0 Delta X-ray, that plane has just started to do a big, huge plunge.
A big, huge plunge. Thank you. Skywest 5154. The MD-80 is one becoming about 2 o'clock, about 10 miles now. Another pilot reports he's really looking pretty bad. They're heading to your right. Do you see him?
Yes, sir. I concur. He is definitely in a nose-down position, descending quite rapidly.
Okay, very good. Keep your eye on him. Alaska 261, are you here with us yet, sir? American 161, you can proceed direct to Denny now.
American 161.
Army 5009 for a contact center on 119.05.
1905, radio, sir. Plane's inverted, sir.
Okay, very good. It looks like he's turning over in front of you now, Skywest 5154. You still got your eyes on him, sir?
There is a sight. He definitely out of control.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, he's inverted.
Okay. Just do what you need to do there, Skywest 5154. Keep us advised.
And he's just hit the water. Yes, sir. He hit the water. He's down.
Okay.
For position, I'm right abeam of 50 Delta X-ray.
Yeah, he just now hit it. We have the spot marked right here. Thanks, guys. American 161, contact center on 126.52.
26752, American 161. Center, he's about 2.5 miles off the end of Anacapa, just towards Point Mugu.
Okay, it's about 2.5 miles off the east end of Anacapa, was it?
Sure, that's affirmative. Actually, he's up the northeast end, probably 030 heading off Anacapa. There was a boat that doesn't seem to be turning around right next to him.
Roger that. 0 Delta X-ray. Do you still see the spot right where it went in? Pretty humbling, right? Let's see here. So some of the lessons learned from this accident. One of the major things that we have come, to identify from this accident was, as in this situation, you can't hold. It's hard to figure out how to say this, but there's definitely mistakes that were made. Some human factors that played in part to this. In the transcript of dispatch communication, maintenance control communication with the pilot,
you know, there's a lot of talk of, you know, being able to troubleshoot and I've got this under control kind of attitude. And it's kind of a macho attitude that happened. I mean, obviously, you don't like, it's not a, I'm not trying to be negative towards the pilot. This is a situation that's very sensitive, right? But but there was definitely an attitude of like, I can handle this. You know, he wanted to troubleshoot rather than ATC had told him, and it's missing from that audio that you just heard, but ATC had told him that he was cleared to come in and land at LAX. The pilot, he went into 2 separate dives before the final descent. And he was able to maintain control at 17,000 feet, 17,500 or something like that for a short amount of time. But ATC had told him, you know, why don't you come in and land the aircraft? It's always a lot better to try to land it, fix things on the ground than it is to try to fix them in the air. But there wasn't a whole lot of like standard operating procedures. There wasn't a whole lot of like information on that, you know. It was always up to the pilot. Nowadays, because of this accident, there is absolutely no troubleshooting allowed in the air. If there's an issue, we're not going to make things worse by trying to fix them in the air. That's the wrong place to do it. We get them on the ground. If it's big enough of an emergency, we get them on the ground as quickly as possible to figure out what's going on. We never try to fix them in the air. So as a dispatcher, that's something you guys need to, you know, take in is if a pilot's asking for maintenance control in the air and he's asking for some help, you know, figuring out like straight up right there, it's no troubleshooting. So if the maintenance control, if you see maintenance control trying to troubleshoot in the air, you know, say, hey, talk to the maintenance controller and say, hey, I don't think it's a good idea to troubleshoot in the air. You know, it's something that we need to kind of monitor. You know, there's a couple other mistakes that were made, but anyways, what ended up being the cause of the accident, this jack screw on the on the horizontal stabilizer where it attaches to the vertical stabilizer. So let's see, here's the MD-80 right here. Basically, there's a jack screw that actuates the up and down movement. The entire vertical stabilizer, or I'm sorry, the horizontal stabilizer, I keep saying that. The entire horizontal stabilizer is a movable surface. So anyways, the jack screw that actuates that it was required that maintenance lubricates this jack screw. Okay, this is the actual jack screw that was recovered from the horizontal stabilizer. They found out that several threads were stripped and stuff like that, and basically the lubrication that was required to be on it was not applied, but was signed off by maintenance. And so basically it just sheared off and they lost all vertical control of the aircraft due to it not being lubricated properly. So this accident led to Huge improvements on the way we do our maintenance, the way things are signed off, the way things are done, basically, with our aircraft, the regular maintenance and stuff like that. But, you know, just like everything else in aviation, we learn from accident, we learn from tragedy. It's just sad that it was at the cost of a large, the lives of a lot of people. But anyways, that's the short and long of this accident. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time you hear about this accident. This memorial is just off of Anacapa Island. And it's for Flight 261, but anyways, it's like a giant sundial. But yeah, pretty horrific accident due to the cause of some failure on decision making, right? I mean, huge failure on maintenance. The guy that did the maintenance, and it's hard to say a failure on the pilots. They did the best they could in the situation they were given, but yeah, 83 passengers, 2 pilots, 3 cabin crew members, and 83 passengers. So, yeah. Anyways, any questions or comments or on anything we talked about tonight?
I'm a little bit worried about knowing all the systems, but it's reassuring knowing that we're not going to be, I don't know, telling them that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, our job with the systems is like how it relates to MELs, right? That's our part in the equation. And we went through the CRJ a little bit, but there's a lot more to learn, and you're not required to memorize it all. I still have to go back and look at my information, but they have, each airline's going to be the same way. They're going to have a system or some way for you to look up that information on the fly, things that you need. You're not required to memorize all the MELs or CDLs or anything like that, but having a basic understanding of how systems relate to one another is going to help you as a dispatcher. But yeah, I mean, I've got a binder that has, it's kind of like a quick reference binder. It has a whole bunch of information that I referred to daily, and you'll get the same thing when you get to an airline. You have that. You also have all of your DRM. That's why we talk about DRM, because that's an important part of the equation. Using the people around you, using their experience to help you make good decisions is a big part of our job, you know. And recognizing those hazardous attitudes of, you know, I can handle this all by myself. That's a pretty hazardous attitude, and that's one that a lot of dispatchers fall into, is they refuse to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
And you make mistakes when you don't ask questions and you don't know the answer, you know. So never be afraid to ask a question, even if you feel like it's a stupid one. Always ask if you don't know. So you're going to have lots of resources at your fingertips when you become a dispatcher. So don't feel like you have to know it all right now. This is super basic intro to dispatching, and you learn the rest when you get to the airline, you know. So just remember that.
Okay.
Let's see. So we're like way ahead, which is good because I like to spend time on practical things more than I like to spend time on things that don't really pertain to our job. So I think, let's see. Let's play a game of Would You Rather real quick. Would you rather end class now and have a nice weekend, or
Okay.
would you rather do the review for the test so that you guys can take the test on Monday and then we can get into the fun stuff?
Nice weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with next weekend.
Yeah, end class now would be sweet.
All right. Enjoy. Enjoy it. It's the last one you guys get.
Oh.
All right.
No, it's yeah, so Monday we'll do the review for the test. Tuesday we'll take the test. Wednesday we'll probably start playing with SkyVector. We'll go over weight and balance. We'll go over legal to go. We'll go over our 1 nav aid, 2 nav aid rules, and alternate minimums, landing minimums, things like that. We're going to review all of that stuff and start getting into the nitty gritty of flight planning. So I hope you guys are ready. And in the famous words of who is it? Jurassic Park, the first one, when he's about to try to turn on the power, he says, "Hold on to your butts." That's what I want you guys to do. So, anyways, have a nice weekend.
You too. Thank